The morning sun cast long shadows across the abandoned streets of Phoenix, Arizona, as Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez adjusted her tactical vest and checked her ammunition one final time. The decorated Marine had survived 3 tours overseas, but nothing had prepared her for the nightmare that had engulfed her homeland 6 months ago. The zombie outbreak had started in the major cities, spreading like wildfire across the country, turning neighbors into mindless predators and transforming bustling metropolises into graveyards of the living dead. Maya's hazel eyes scanned the desolate landscape through her binoculars, searching for any sign of movement among the burned-out cars and debris-littered sidewalks. Behind her, 4 other women prepared their weapons with the same methodical precision that had kept them alive when millions of others had fallen. Dr. Jessica Park, a former CDC epidemiologist, carefully loaded tranquilizer darts into a modified rifle, hoping to capture a live specimen for her research into a potential cure. Her Korean-American heritage had made her a target for initial blame when the outbreak began, but her brilliance and determination had proven invaluable to their survival group. Next to her, Brooklyn Williams, a former NYPD SWAT officer with intricate tattoos covering her dark skin, methodically sharpened her tactical knife while humming an old gospel hymn her grandmother used to sing. The blade gleamed in the morning light as she tested its edge, satisfied with its razor sharpness. Ashley Thompson, barely 22 and fresh out of college when the world ended, had transformed from a sociology student into a deadly sniper, her blonde hair now streaked with dirt and tied back in a practical ponytail. She carefully adjusted the scope on her hunting rifle, a weapon that had belonged to her grandfather and now served as their group's primary long-range protection. The youngest member of their team, Olivia Martinez, bounced nervously on her feet while checking the explosives she had crafted from salvaged materials, her background in chemistry proving surprisingly useful in their fight for survival. The 5 women had found each other during the chaotic evacuation of Phoenix, when the military's containment efforts had failed spectacularly. They had watched helplessly as entire neighborhoods were overrun in minutes, families torn apart by creatures that had once been their loved ones. Maya had taken command naturally, her military training kicking in as she organized their escape from the city's overrun emergency shelter. They had been moving north toward a rumored safe zone in Colorado for weeks, scavenging supplies and avoiding the massive hordes that roamed the highways like a plague of locusts. Their current position offered a tactical advantage, an elevated highway overpass that provided clear sight lines in all directions while limiting the approaches zombies could take to reach them. Maya had chosen this spot specifically because intelligence from other survivor groups suggested a massive horde was moving through this area, potentially numbering in the thousands. The women had decided to make their stand here rather than risk being caught in the open by such overwhelming numbers. As the sun climbed higher, the first signs of the approaching threat became visible on the horizon. A dark mass moved like a living shadow across the desert landscape, kicking up dust clouds that obscured the morning sky. The sound reached them first, a low, constant moaning that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, punctuated by the shuffle of countless feet dragging across asphalt. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she realized the true scale of what they were facing. This wasn't just a horde, it was an army of the undead, moving with a terrifying sense of purpose toward their position. Jessica lowered her binoculars with trembling hands, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "There are so many of them," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing sound of the approaching mass. "I count at least 3,000, maybe more." Brooklyn's jaw tightened as she considered their options, knowing that conventional tactics would be useless against such numbers. Ashley steadied her rifle against the concrete barrier, calculating wind speed and distance while trying to ignore the fear clawing at her chest. The zombies moved with an unnatural coordination that had developed over the months since the outbreak began. What had started as mindless shambling had evolved into something more disturbing, a collective intelligence that allowed them to work together in ways that defied everything the survivors thought they knew about the undead. Maya had witnessed this phenomenon before, watching in horror as zombies had formed crude tools and even basic strategies to overcome obstacles. As the horde drew closer, individual figures became distinguishable within the mass. Former office workers in tattered business suits stumbled alongside suburban mothers still wearing the remains of their daily routines. Children moved among them, their small forms making the scene even more heartbreaking. These had all been people once, with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. Now they were something else entirely, driven by an insatiable hunger that could never be satisfied. Maya raised her hand, signaling for her team to take their positions. The battle for their lives was about to begin, and failure would mean not just death, but joining the ranks of the very creatures they fought against. In the distance, the moaning grew louder, and the ground began to vibrate with the weight of thousands of feet marching toward their position. The first wave crashed against their position like a tsunami of rotting flesh and gnashing teeth, the sound of thousands of feet shuffling across concrete creating a rhythmic drumbeat of impending doom. Maya's rifle cracked repeatedly as she placed precise headshots into the leading zombies, each bullet finding its mark with deadly accuracy while brass casings clinked against the concrete barrier beside her. Her military training had taught her to remain calm under pressure, but the sheer volume of enemies tested even her iron nerves as sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool morning air. Brooklyn worked alongside her with practiced efficiency, using her tactical knife to dispatch any undead that managed to climb onto their overpass, the SWAT officer's movements fluid and lethal as each strike was calculated to sever spinal cords or destroy brainstems with surgical precision. The two women had developed an unspoken rhythm during their months together, Maya providing covering fire while Brooklyn handled close-quarters threats that breached their perimeter. Ashley's sniper rifle provided crucial support from her elevated position on a nearby billboard structure, picking off zombies that threatened to overwhelm their defensive line with methodical precision that would have made her grandfather proud. Her shots echoed across the desert as she systematically eliminated the fastest-moving threats, buying precious time for her teammates to reposition and reload their weapons. The sociology student turned marksman had discovered a natural talent for reading wind patterns and calculating bullet drop that kept their group alive through countless encounters. Jessica moved between them all like a battlefield medic, administering first aid with steady hands while simultaneously sharing intelligence about zombie movement patterns she had observed through her scientific lens. Her background in epidemiology allowed her to predict behavioral changes in the horde that saved their lives multiple times, recognizing subtle shifts in the undead's approach that indicated tactical adaptations. The battle raged for hours as wave after wave of undead pressed their attack with relentless determination, their moaning creating a constant background noise that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the defenders. Olivia's homemade explosives proved devastatingly effective, creating gaps in the zombie lines that the women exploited with ruthless efficiency while the young chemist's face remained focused and determined despite the chaos surrounding them. Her improvised grenades and tripwires turned sections of the overpass into killing fields that channeled the undead into predetermined zones where the other women could maximize their effectiveness. Despite their tactical success and impressive kill count, it became increasingly clear that their ammunition wouldn't last forever, and more disturbing still, the horde seemed to be learning from each assault, adapting their approach to counter the women's defensive tactics in ways that suggested an intelligence far beyond what anyone had previously observed in the undead. Maya noticed that newer waves of zombies avoided the areas where explosives had detonated, while others began using fallen bodies as shields against sniper fire, a development that sent chills down her spine as she realized they were facing something far more dangerous than mindless monsters. As darkness fell across the desert landscape like a suffocating blanket, the zombie horde's behavior became even more disturbing and coordinated in ways that defied everything the women thought they understood about the undead plague. The creatures no longer moved in the chaotic, stumbling masses they had grown accustomed to fighting, but instead began coordinating their attacks with an intelligence that chilled the survivors to their very bones and made Maya question whether they were still facing the same enemy they had been battling for months. They were being herded toward a specific location with the precision of a military operation, as if the undead were following some kind of strategic plan developed by a tactical mind that understood human psychology and warfare better than any of them wanted to admit. The realization hit Maya like a physical blow when she noticed that every zombie retreat had pushed them in the same direction, toward a narrow canyon that would serve as a perfect killing ground if they allowed themselves to be trapped there. The women were forced to abandon their overpass position in a fighting retreat when zombies began attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, using crude tools fashioned from debris and even forming human ladders with their own bodies to reach the elevated defensive position that had served them so well during the daylight hours. Brooklyn's police training kicked in as she organized their withdrawal, laying down covering fire while Jessica and Olivia gathered their essential supplies and Ashley provided overwatch from increasingly compromised positions. The undead moved with a coordination that suggested they were receiving directions from somewhere within their ranks, possibly from specimens that retained enough cognitive function to plan and execute complex tactical maneuvers. Fighting through the night with nothing but muzzle flashes and emergency flares to illuminate their desperate battle, the team discovered an abandoned military checkpoint half a mile from their original position that offered better defensive capabilities and a chance to catch their breath. The facility had been hastily evacuated months earlier, with equipment and supplies left scattered across multiple rooms as if the soldiers had fled in the middle of important operations. Inside the checkpoint's communication center, they found evidence that other survivor groups had passed through recently, including encrypted radio communications that suggested a larger resistance movement was operating in the region with resources and coordination that far exceeded what any of them had dared to hope still existed. Brooklyn's police training helped her decode some of the military-grade messages using equipment manuals left behind by the previous occupants, revealing coordinates for a meeting point 50 miles north along with authentication codes that would identify them as friendly forces to any resistance patrols they might encounter. The checkpoint's automated defense systems were still partially functional thanks to backup power generators that had been running on solar panels, giving the women their first real respite in days to tend their wounds and plan their next move, while motion sensors and automated turrets provided early warning against zombie infiltration attempts. Jessica made a disturbing discovery while examining zombie corpses that had been caught in the facility's defensive perimeter during previous attacks, finding that the undead were showing signs of rapid evolution that went far beyond anything she had documented in her earlier research. The specimens displayed enhanced muscle density and improved coordination, but more troubling still were the modifications to their nervous systems that suggested they were developing new sensory capabilities and possibly even rudimentary communication abilities that could explain their improved tactical coordination. She realized with growing horror that they were running out of time to find a cure before the zombies became too advanced to stop, possibly evolving into something that could challenge human dominance permanently and irreversibly. The journey to the coordinates proved treacherous beyond anything the women had previously experienced, as they navigated through zombie-infested territory while being stalked by what appeared to be an organized pack of the undead that moved with military precision and displayed tactical awareness that made their previous encounters seem like child's play. These creatures had abandoned the shambling, disorganized behavior that characterized typical zombie hordes, instead moving in coordinated formations that suggested they were following field manuals and implementing strategies that mirrored human warfare doctrine with terrifying effectiveness. Maya's combat experience became crucial as she identified patterns in their movements that reminded her of insurgent tactics she had faced overseas, recognizing flanking maneuvers and pincer movements that forced her to constantly adapt their route and timing to avoid being trapped in carefully orchestrated ambushes. The undead were setting traps with a sophistication that included false retreats designed to lure the women into killing zones, coordinated attacks from multiple directions timed to maximize casualties, and even the use of decoy sounds to mask their true positions until it was almost too late to respond. During a particularly harrowing encounter in an abandoned suburban neighborhood, they discovered that the zombies were being controlled by a small group of highly evolved specimens that retained human intelligence while possessing enhanced physical capabilities that made them exponentially more dangerous than their lesser counterparts. These alpha zombies, as Jessica had begun calling them, in her research notes, were coordinating the massive hordes through what appeared to be a form of telepathic communication that allowed them to direct thousands of undead with the efficiency of a modern military command structure. The alphas moved differently than regular zombies, with fluid grace and calculated precision that spoke of retained muscle memory and cognitive function, making them nearly indistinguishable from living humans until they revealed their true nature through acts of inhuman strength and endurance. Ashley managed to eliminate one of these creatures with a perfectly placed sniper shot that required her to account for the target's unpredictable movement patterns and enhanced reflexes, but the alpha's death caused immediate chaos among the lesser zombies while also drawing unwanted attention to their location from every undead creature within a 5-mile radius. The elimination of the alpha zombie triggered a response that revealed the full scope of the undead network operating in a region, as hundreds of zombies began converging on their position with a coordination that suggested they were all receiving the same urgent directive from surviving alpha specimens. Maya realized they had inadvertently declared war on an enemy that possessed both the numbers to overwhelm them and the intelligence to outmaneuver them, forcing the team into a desperate fighting retreat through increasingly hostile territory where every shadow could conceal an ambush and every sound might bring down another wave of coordinated attacks. Upon reaching the coordinates after 36 hours of continuous movement and combat, the women found a hidden underground facility concealed beneath what appeared to be an abandoned gas station, where dozens of other survivors had gathered in a complex that spoke of months of careful preparation and resource accumulation. The resistance movement was larger and more organized than they had imagined, with military personnel, scientists, and civilians all working together in specialized roles to develop comprehensive strategies for reclaiming their country from the undead plague that had transformed their world into a battlefield where humanity's very survival hung in the balance. The underground facility revealed the true scope of the zombie threat through satellite imagery and reconnaissance reports that painted a terrifying picture of coordinated undead operations across the entire continental United States, with massive hordes converging on major population centers following patterns that suggested they were being directed toward specific targets with strategic military value. The resistance leaders, a mix of former Pentagon officials and CDC researchers who had managed to establish this command center during the early days of the outbreak, explained that the alpha zombies were attempting to destroy critical infrastructure including power grids, water treatment facilities, and communication hubs to prevent any possibility of human recovery and ensure the permanent collapse of organized civilization. Maya volunteered her team for a high-risk mission to infiltrate one of the main horde gathering points and eliminate the alpha controlling the group, knowing that her combat experience and her team's proven ability to work together under impossible odds made them uniquely qualified for such a dangerous assignment that could turn the tide of the entire war. Preparation for the mission revealed that Jessica's research had identified a potential weakness in the evolved zombies through careful analysis of the alpha specimen they had eliminated during their journey to the facility, discovering that a specific frequency could disrupt their coordination abilities and temporarily sever their connection to the lesser zombies under their command. Using salvaged military equipment and Jessica's scientific expertise, the team developed sonic weapons that could temporarily disable the creature's enhanced capabilities, but the plan required them to get close enough to the alpha zombie to deploy the device effectively, then fight their way through hundreds of undead to reach the extraction point before the effects wore off and the creature regained control of its forces. The sonic device was experimental technology that had never been tested against a live alpha in combat conditions, making their mission essentially a field test with their lives hanging in the balance and the fate of the resistance depending on whether Jessica's theories would hold up under actual battlefield stress. The mission began at dawn with the 5 women being inserted into hostile territory by helicopter, flying low through mountain valleys to avoid detection by the numerous flying zombies that had begun appearing in recent weeks as the plague continued to evolve and adapt to humanity's survival strategies. They had to navigate through a city that had been completely overrun by zombies while carrying heavy equipment and avoiding detection by the numerous alpha specimens that patrolled the area with methodical precision, using abandoned subway tunnels and building-to-building movement techniques that Brooklyn's urban warfare experience had taught her during her years with the NYPD. The city itself had been transformed into something resembling a military fortress, with zombie sentries posted at regular intervals and patrol routes that covered every major thoroughfare, forcing the women to move through sewers and maintenance tunnels that tested their endurance and nerve while the constant threat of discovery hung over every step of their infiltration. Their target was located in the heart of the zombie-controlled territory, requiring them to penetrate multiple layers of undead defenses while maintaining the element of surprise that would be crucial to their mission's success and their own survival in what had become the most dangerous environment on Earth. Deep in the zombie-controlled city, the women discovered that the undead were constructing crude but effective fortifications and organizing supply lines with a level of sophistication that defied everything they thought they knew about the creatures, transforming the urban landscape into a militarized zone that resembled enemy territory from Maya's overseas deployments more than the familiar American city it had once been. The zombies had repurposed construction equipment and debris to create defensive barriers that channeled movement through predetermined choke points, while organized patrols moved through the streets with the discipline of trained soldiers following established routes and communication protocols. The alpha zombies had developed a primitive but highly effective command structure, complete with scouts that ranged far ahead of the main forces, guards that maintained perimeter security around critical installations, and specialized units designed for different tactical situations including rapid response teams that could converge on threats within minutes of detection. Maya realized with growing dread that they weren't just fighting mindless monsters anymore, but were engaged in warfare against a new species that was rapidly adapting to combat human resistance with strategies that incorporated the best elements of both military doctrine and predatory instinct. The team's approach to the target building required them to fight through increasingly intelligent zombie defenses that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their tactics with adaptations that suggested the undead were learning from previous encounters with human survivors. Olivia's explosives cleared paths through the fortified barriers while Ashley provided overwatch from abandoned rooftops, her sniper rifle picking off key targets that threatened to expose their position to the larger zombie population that swarmed through the streets below like an army of occupation. The alpha zombie they were hunting had taken residence in a former office building that rose 30 stories above the surrounding urban landscape, surrounded by hundreds of lesser undead that formed concentric defensive rings around the structure with overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions that would make any assault extremely costly. Jessica's analysis of the building's layout revealed that the Alpha had chosen its position with tactical brilliance, occupying the top floors where it could coordinate its forces while maintaining escape routes through the building's multiple stairwells and even helicopter access from the roof. Jessica's sonic device worked better than expected when they finally deployed it against the zombie defenders, causing mass confusion among the undead ranks that allowed the team to push deep into the building through stairwells that became killing fields as disoriented zombies stumbled into their line of fire. The device's effects rippled outward from their position like waves in a pond, disrupting the Alpha's control over its minions and creating pockets of chaos that the women exploited with ruthless efficiency as they fought their way up floor by floor toward their target. However, they discovered that the Alpha had anticipated their attack and had prepared countermeasures that included setting elaborate traps throughout the building, positioning elite zombie guards at critical choke points that retained enough cognitive function to resist the sonic weapon's effects, and creating multiple false positions designed to waste their time and ammunition while backup forces converged on the building from across the city. The creature's intelligence became apparent as they encountered increasingly sophisticated defensive measures that included tripwires connected to improvised explosive devices, rooms flooded with toxic gases that the zombies could tolerate but would incapacitate human intruders, and even psychological warfare tactics that used recorded human voices to lure them into ambushes where heavily armed zombie soldiers waited in perfect silence until their targets were completely exposed and vulnerable. The confrontation with the Alpha zombie revealed the most terrifying truth of all when the creature spoke to them in perfect English with the voice and mannerisms of the military general it had once been, demonstrating that these evolved specimens retained their human memories, personalities, and tactical knowledge while gaining enhanced physical abilities and access to a collective consciousness that linked them to every other zombie in their vast network. The Alpha they faced had once been General Marcus Richardson, a decorated veteran of multiple overseas campaigns who recognized Maya's military bearing and combat techniques, adapting its strategy accordingly to counter her every move with the precision of someone who had spent decades studying warfare and human psychology. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall with enhanced musculature that spoke of supernatural strength, yet moved with the fluid grace of a predator while its eyes retained an intelligence that was both familiar and utterly alien, creating a psychological horror that went beyond mere physical threat to challenge the very foundations of what it meant to be human. The battle through the office building became a deadly game of cat and mouse that tested every skill the women had acquired during their months of survival, with the Alpha using its intimate knowledge of human psychology and military tactics to manipulate the team's emotions and create tactical disadvantages that turned their own strengths against them. The creature spoke to them through the building's intercom system in Richardson's cultured voice, taunting them with detailed information about their pasts that it had somehow acquired, exploiting their fears and doubts with surgical precision while directing its zombie minions with hand signals and verbal commands that demonstrated a level of coordination that made their previous encounters seem primitive by comparison. It knew about Maya's fallen comrades from her tours overseas, Jessica's family members who had died in the initial outbreak, Brooklyn's partner who had been killed during the evacuation of New York, Ashley's grandfather whose rifle she carried, and Olivia's younger brother who had been trapped in their college dormitory when the zombies overran the campus, using these personal tragedies as psychological weapons designed to break their focus and will to fight. Brooklyn nearly fell victim to the creature's psychological warfare when it began speaking in her deceased partner's voice, reciting intimate conversations they had shared and promising that she could join him in the collective consciousness if she simply stopped fighting and allowed herself to be transformed. Maya had to physically shake her teammate back to reality while simultaneously coordinating their defense against waves of elite zombie soldiers that moved with military precision through the building's corridors, using flanking maneuvers and suppressive fire that would have been impressive even for living troops. The final confrontation required all 5 women working in perfect coordination, combining their individual skills into a seamless unit that could match the Alpha's enhanced capabilities and tactical brilliance through teamwork and determination that represented the best of human cooperation under impossible circumstances. Jessica's scientific knowledge allowed her to identify the creature's weak points where the sonic device would be most effective. Ashley's marksmanship provided crucial covering fire that kept the Alpha's minions at bay, Brooklyn's combat experience helped coordinate their movements through the building's maze-like layout. Olivia's technical expertise ensured their equipment functioned under battlefield conditions, and Maya's leadership held them together as a fighting unit when fear and despair threatened to overwhelm their resolve. However, destroying the Alpha triggered a massive response from every zombie in the city as the creature's death scream was transmitted through the collective consciousness, forcing them to fight their way to the extraction point through thousands of enraged undead that converged on their location with murderous intent and the desperate fury of a species that had just lost one of its most valuable leaders. The successful elimination of the Alpha zombie caused a cascading failure in the undead network throughout the entire region as the creature's death severed the psychic links that had coordinated thousands of zombies across a 100-mile radius, with leaderless hordes becoming disorganized and vulnerable to systematic elimination by resistance forces who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity to strike back against their undead oppressors. The women's mission had proven that the evolved zombies could be defeated despite their enhanced capabilities and tactical intelligence, providing hope for humanity's eventual recovery and demonstrating that ordinary people could rise to extraordinary challenges when faced with seemingly impossible odds. However, their victory came at a terrible cost as intelligence gathered during the mission revealed that dozens of other Alpha zombies were operating across the country, each controlling massive armies of the undead from strategic positions that would require similar high-risk operations to eliminate, meaning that their successful mission was only the first step in a much larger campaign that would test the limits of human courage and determination. Maya and her team were promoted to leadership positions within the resistance movement based on their proven ability to work together under extreme pressure, tasked with training other survivor groups in the specialized tactics they had developed through months of trial and error in the field against increasingly intelligent opponents. Their success had made them symbols of hope for the scattered remnants of American civilization scattered across fortified enclaves and hidden bunkers, living proof that coordinated human resistance could challenge the zombie plague and reclaim territory that had been lost to the undead hordes. The 5 women found themselves at the center of a growing network of survivor communities that looked to them for guidance and inspiration, with their tactical innovations being adopted by resistance cells from coast to coast as humanity slowly began to organize an effective counteroffensive against the creatures that had nearly driven them to extinction. The story concluded with the 5 women leading a coordinated assault on multiple Alpha positions simultaneously, using the knowledge and experience gained from their first successful mission to train strike teams that could replicate their tactics across the country in a synchronized campaign designed to cripple the zombie command structure before it could adapt to their methods. As dawn broke over the battlefield where dozens of resistance fighters moved with the precision and confidence that Maya's team had taught them, the women stood ready to continue their fight for humanity's survival with the knowledge that their courage and determination had inspired others to join the resistance against impossible odds. The zombie plague had changed their world forever, transforming a nation of cities and suburbs into a hostile landscape where every day was a battle for survival, but it had also revealed the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit, particularly embodied by these 5 remarkable women who had refused to surrender their future to the forces of darkness and had instead chosen to fight back with everything they possessed, proving that even in humanity's darkest hour, hope could survive and flourish when people stood together against the end of the world.